Hello and welcome to this tutorial video concerning weathered and rusted metallics. I'm going to explain you how I achieve an effect like I did on this Rackham miniature called Nurbal the Sculptor. So yeah, as you can see on the legs, these are painted in metallics, and yeah, I've achieved a rusted look on them. Also this staff. So that's an effect which is quite easy to achieve, and I'm going to explain you how to do it in this video. The subject which we will be painting today is this Orc Chieftain by Warplock Miniatures. He's nearly done. But as you might notice, his shoes need some more work. We're going to paint the soles and the tips of his boots in metallics. This orc is supposed to be wandering in some swamps, so these tips will probably should look very rusted. So that's a nice opportunity to explain how I achieve a rust effect, which is quite easy in fact. The paints I will be using are Chainmail by Citadel, then probably some Mithril Silver to do some highlighting at the later stages, and then the most important part to achieve the look are these inks by Vallejo. So yeah, the regular black ink, and then the skin wash. This is really a great rust color. Actually, I didn't use it. I never used it for shading skin or something, but I always use them on metallics to achieve a nice rust effect. So we're going to mix in these two probably to create the effect. Okay. I'll be using nothing special the brush, but I'd like to mention it. I'm using Series 7 Winsor & Newton Series 7 number 1 brush. A palette, it's a wet palette, and then we're going to dilute the inks quite a bit. So I'd like to keep some distilled water in one of these empty Vallejo bottles. Or of course you can just transfer some water over with from your mixing pot also. Okay, let's get started. Okay, we're going to get some chainmail on the palette. Just thin it only a bit. I always try not to thin my metallics too much, because then you really get the effect that the metal particles, you almost see them floating in the water. Like this is of course an extreme example, but what's the case when I do this? So it gets very thin. It's a bit more difficult to control than regular paints. So yeah, only thin them a bit. Get our orc out. And yeah, since we only tint our metallics a bit, we only probably going to need one coat of this. I primed this miniature white, so before applying the metallics I painted the areas I'm painting now. I've painted them in black. Of course, if you primed the figure in black, then this is not necessary. Now, painting them black has two advantages. That's, as you see now, I'm leaving the crevices black. That's one advantage, and yeah, I simply think that if you paint metallics over white, it looks a bit odd to me, I think, but it's possible. But as you can see, I'm a bit painting a bit sloppy now, leaving some areas black. That's not really a problem. It will only add to the final weathered effect. So that's 1 foot done. 1 foot, sorry. This foot has a less denting on it. That's it, I think. Okay, now for the inks. Yeah, the easiest way to mix them is just make 2 pools of them, and we'll see how things go while we mix them. So yeah, at first we're going to start quite dark, so I'm going to put some black here, and then I think, yeah, you see me three times. I took 3 or 4 parts of black, and then I'm going to take this bit of skin wash. Still a bit too dark. I'm going to add another brush tip. I'm going to thin it quite a bit, so let's say 2 or 3 parts water, 1 part ink. Let's make it 3 parts water. Stir it a bit. And then what I usually do, some people consider it a bad habit, but I'm going to always test the consistency of the paint mix on my thumbnail. So yeah, as you can see, this is quite transparent, right? But it's still a bit lighter than I initially planned, so I'm going to add another tip of black. I want to test it again. Looks a bit better. Okay. And I'm going to apply this to this tip. Don't take too much paint on your brush. So I loaded some ink on it. I'll try to show you. I'll try to show you how much ink you should load on your brush to achieve this effect. So I'm loading some ink on the brush, and then carefully a few strokes on the tissue, so that most paint is removed from the brush. And then I start painting this tip. I'm going to go over the entire tip and going to stop at the base where I want the darkest color to be. So you'll see where I put off my brush, where I remove my brush from the model, there's going to be this small pool of ink left, and that that's the thing we're going to use to achieve a nice shade from lighter to darker. So again, you see me moving my brush over a large surface and then removing it at the bottom. And as a bonus, we get some additional ink in the recesses here. I'm trying to get the darkest colors near the bottom. And the heel. Again, I'm loading the brush, removing most of the ink, then doing the same on this tip. Now to achieve this effect on the heels is a bit more difficult because you have a smaller surface there, but try to do the same. Basically moving from the top to the bottom. Okay, this dries fairly quick. Still, I'm not really convinced of the color. It looks too brown, so we're going to add some more black to my initial mix. And I'm almost out of black ink. Yeah, I also have the bad habit of putting too much. I was putting too much paint on my palette, but okay. Bit of water. Okay, by now the inks on the model, they're probably dry. So we're going to do exactly the same with this darker mix. Again, going over the entire metallic surface and trying to pull away your brush at the base of the foot soles, the boot soles. Okay, that's starting to look a bit better, but still I want to have an even darker tone at the base. I'm going to make a separate pool here. Add a brush of black. And then yeah, I'm going to add a tiny bit of water, not too much. Yeah, this is very, very dark, you see. And then I'm not going over the entire surface again, just near the bottom. Just making small movements with my brush and always pulling away the brush from the model where I want to create the rust spots, where I want the darkest color to be. Maybe to make things more interesting, we're going to create a rust spot here on the top. I'm just making a small, yes, basically a pool of ink. I'm going to do the same here, the darker color. Still, it doesn't really look that much like a rust effect, but that's the effect we're going to do now. This pool of this is pure skin wash. We're going to add a tiny bit of the black to make it a bit darker, but not too dark like this. It's perfect. Not going to add any water. I'm not going to dilute this. Again, remove most of the ink from the brush. Just make sure this is entirely dry. So by now I think it's right, except this pool. Make sure it's dry, and then in the middle of the darkest pools of the darkest color we painted on last, just put on a small pool of the skin wash mix. Painted on too much of the skin wash, but yeah, I usually try to remove this with just rubbing my finger over it carefully. Okay, let this dry. In the meantime, I'm going to put some pure ink wash on my palette. We're not going to dilute this. I'm just painting on another layer of pure ink wash. Just try to do the same as the previous step, but make the pools a bit smaller. So that's the step, the phase we're in now. Now the problem with this is that this doesn't look like a metallic part anymore. So we're going to paint some metallics over them again. With my wet palette, I have the advantage that our base coat mix is still wet. I'm only going to add a slight bit more of this water, make it a bit thinner, but not too thin. Now we have to make sure that it's really dry, because otherwise we'll have some of the ink running into the metallic paint. And there is still one spot here that didn't dry completely, but it will be dry once we'll get there. Okay, now carefully paint over the metallics and try to remove try to avoid painting over the biggest rust spots we did. So there's only a little of metallic paint on my brush. It's quite thin, so it's easy to have quite some control over it. I'm painting some of these edges, I'm highlighting them a bit. And this way I'll paint the entire foot, the entire metal tip. The other foot. So you'll notice that this transition isn't that smooth, but I think it will only add to the weathered effect, to really have a really hard rust on them. So if there's an edge like this dent in the sole, try to take out the edges for a better look. So the edges of the metal parts themselves. Alright. Quite happy about the look already, but just going to do one final highlight with wrong model. We're going to do one last highlight with the mithril silver. Just putting a bit on the palette. Now the mithril silver pure might be a bit too bright, so I'm just going to make a separate pool here with some mithril and then our chainmail mix, only a bit. And that's probably thin enough. Like I said already, I'm not really a fan of thinning metallic paints. Now just going off the camera, I'm going to add a slight bit of water. It's a bit too thick to control. Painting it here on my finger to test it. Okay, and then yeah, just along the edges. Tiny bit of highlighting. That's it. So quite easy to achieve. In general, just take some time to practice with metallics. Don't thin them too much, but thin them a bit to get more control. Also with the inks, just test the consistency on your finger, and if it's too thin, then just put over a second layer. The inks are very transparent, so that's an advantage you'll have to take. You can take. So hope you like this tutorial video. If you're on YouTube, please remember to click the like button. If you're not yet a subscriber, please subscribe and spread the word. Take care. Bye.